Alrighty, Mr. H here with you. Welcome to US2. How you guys doing today? I hope you're doing great. I'm happy you're here. I hope you're happy you're here too. Let's just plunge right into it, eh? Alrighty, America's Industrial Revolution. Now, the whole thing started in the Connecticut River Valley back in the early 19th century. It started with textiles. They also were experimenting with steel and stuff like this, even electronics, or at least the early 19th century version of it. By 1850, the United States has a minor role in the world economy. By the late 19th century, 1890 or so, the United States has 35% of the world's industrial capacity. Wow, what happened? Why did it explode so fast? Well, it started with oil, steel, and consumer products. Really, what's consumer products? Well, a big product back then were sewing machines. Everybody wanted a sewing machine. And if you got a sewing machine, think about what it takes to make a sewing machine. Well, I need wood, I need metal, right? So somebody has to mine the metal out of the ground to get shaped into the proper metal. Someplace somebody cut down a tree and you got the lumber for it, and the stuff had to be shipped to your factory. Then you had to pay somebody to put it together. Somebody like this maybe, kid, lady, man. Got to pay them, and then you got to take it to the store where some slimeball salesman sells it to somebody, right? Now, when you start producing this much stuff in one place, say you're in New York, even though it's pretty big, you can only sell so many sewing machines. So let's go down the road to Philadelphia. And when you take over that market, let's head over to Pittsburgh. Stuff has to get there. That's where the railroads come in. That's where you see steel and oil. Oil, the petroleum, steel for the rails and the railroad itself. Here we go. The whole thing gets hooked together. Here are the factories. Everybody's working there. Got the smokestacks, everything else happening. Here. Now, even though there's a lot of economic growth and the production skyrockets, there is a human cost to all this stuff. Starts off with undercutting skilled labor. Anybody can work on an assembly line. Take shoes, for instance. One skilled craftsman makes a pair of shoes. It takes him the whole day. One pair of shoes in a day. And they're very good shoes, and they cost like 30 bucks back then. If I have an assembly line, you put the heel on the shoe, you put the shoestrings in, you put it in a box and haul it off someplace. Yeah, suddenly I get a bunch of people who have no idea what they're doing small tasks along the way. I can make 100 shoes in a day, and the shoemaker guy is going to get thrown out of business. Of course, there's also environmental damage, even though they weren't sure what that meant back then. It's happening. It's all the smokestacks. They put the dirty water back in the river that people are drinking out of, right? There's going to be a lot of environmental damage to come back to bite us one day. And economic damage, boom and bust economic cycles. Long before there was the Great Depression, there was, the Great Depression of 1893 to 1897. And before that, there was the, Great Depression, 1873 to 1879, 6 years where no one could find work and the prices were too high. So before there was a Great Depression, there was a Great Depression. And before the Great Depression, there was, the Great Depression. Keeps going in cycles because no one really sure what the rules are, and there's really no regulation of any kind there would be today. Now, how did America's Industrial Revolution begin? Well, like I said, started in the Connecticut River Valley with textiles, but the Civil War is what kickstarts industry, especially the railroads. You need weapons, they're making weapons. Remember what I told you about making the sewing machine? Same thing with a musket, right? Wood and metal, got to ship it to where it needs to go. That's where the railroads come in. Cannons, all the supplies you need, uniforms, all the stuff has to be mass produced. Put it in a railroad, a whole bunch of stuff gets there at one time. That's the beauty of the railroads, right? Also have the corporate business model. Basically, it's an updated version of joint stock company. Have that today, right? Stock exchange. Hasn't changed much since the days of the Virginia Company. We try to do the same thing, minus hopefully the mass starvation. Yeah, you might want to write this down. Stop it, take a picture, do something here, because this is kind of important. Can you say essay? Essay, excuse me, essay, something here in the air. Characteristic of the American Industrial Revolution. Well, exploitation of cheap labor. Let me tell you what they're talking about there. People don't get paid a lot working on the assembly line. You're making your whopping 25 cents a day. I don't know, you think maybe you deserve a little bit more, so boom, they're going to throw you out and bring in another guy who's willing to work for 20 cents. That guy starts complaining, they'll throw him out, find somebody who's working for 15. Maybe they catch a bunch of Chinese immigrants who have no idea how much money they're supposed to make, and they think 10 cents is a lot because they weren't making anything in China. Exploitation of cheap labor. Also, the spread of technology and communication, transportation, and of course, the factory system. Communication, what's the big communication model back then? Starts off with a telegraph, then comes the telephone. I can coordinate all the shipments. Transportation, you know what's big then? Trains. Trains are big. Everybody loves trains. Use the phone to coordinate when they're going to show up so they don't run into each other out on the rails, right? Of course, the factory system. Everybody's in one place making the stuff. You got your materials, the people working there, and the shipping. All comes out of one place. Factory system makes it much more efficient. Now here's number 3. This one sounds very ominous. Demand for workers who can be controlled. Ooh. All right, talked about number 1 a little bit, so you got a good idea what I'm talking about here. We don't want the workers demanding too much. Oh yeah, you're 25 cents a day. You should be happy with that. Don't want them getting together and discussing how to make more money. Don't want them getting together and having strikes and stopping stuff, right? And sometimes the workers kind of get upset because their buddy's working there with the textiles and gets his fingers ripped off, and then you just throw him out and you bring in somebody new and he doesn't get anything. So these workers, they can get a little bit demanding. So I try to control them. It's not going to work out too well. Now, even though you've got tons of people walking around and they're kind of interchangeable, there's a lot of competition because you have that many people walking around looking for work, especially in the northern cities. You could start another sewing machine company real easy. Mr. H's sewing machine ends up doing battle against Bob's sewing machine company. And there's plenty of people who need jobs. And if I'm charging so much and Bob is charging so much, hey, sooner or later you start going to number 5 to drop in price and start looking for the cheaper stuff. $10 pizza is great, but $5 pizza? You start to look at that. Don't know if you're going to buy it or not, but yeah, it definitely got your attention, didn't it? Now, number 6 is a little strange. So just kind of listen up and try to follow along. I'm not going to hurt you too much here, number 6. Now, the money supply does not keep up with productivity. Back then, or back before 1972, every dollar in the United States is backed by $1 worth of gold or $1 worth of silver. Now they print money and say it's backed by faith in the United States government. It's a pretty good racket. But back then, no, you got to have $1 worth of gold or silver to back up a dollar. So it leads to high interest rates and not a lot of credit. So you get a loan, but the interest rate's going to be really high. We're talking borderline loan shark kind of stuff. And it's very hard to get a loan because there's just not that much money to hand out to people. So not much credit. Interest loans are kind of hard to get. You know, not easy in the late 19th century. When you make it works great, but getting up that start line's a little tough. Now, what makes this thing happen? Again, it's the railroads, because if I have so much production where I'm in Pittsburgh and I'm making sewing machines, only so many sewing machines I can sell, So I got to go to other places, Cleveland, Philadelphia, someplace like that. And that's where the railroads come in. Now, building a railroad, our friend is frowning here because building a railroad is not easy. Oh, no. You need land, right? Put the rails and the ties down. I got to get the assembling materials, steel for the rails, wood for the ties. Hey, let's not forget the locomotive itself, right? Well, did I mention you got to buy these materials because, it's not free. And this stuff costs a lot of money. So you're already shelling out quite a few bucks here. And you need people to work. So you got to go find them. Now, working on a railroad is tough, man. That's a rough work. Those ties, they excuse me 1 minute. There we are. Those ties, they weigh a lot. And so do steel rails. So you're doing a lot of moving stuff around. So not everyone wants to do that, but it's late 19th century and people looking for work, so they're going to show up for that. Now you got to get the people to where they're going to work. One thing to work in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, work the rails. When you start going further west, it starts getting a little tougher. Out on the prairies, storms, distance. You got to get people out there. You got to keep them alive. Food, water, shelter. That's why towns build up where they build up in the West sometimes. That's why Omaha and Kansas City and Denver are where they are. They're on the railroad. People work there, stop, and decide they're going to live there. You got to find somebody else to work and keep moving that thing west. Of course, you also have stuff like your Indian attacks because, it's the late 19th century and Indians don't like you coming through their land, especially with a railroad where you didn't ask them. It's not asking too much, is it? Yeah, apparently it was. Now, before you build this railroad, what do you need? You need money. And as you guessed, it's a lot of money to build a railroad. Oh, a whole lot. And not everybody's got that kind of money. There's only one organization that can shell out the kind of money you need to build a railroad. Yep, the United States government. Government subsidies. And it works because by 1900, there's 193,000 miles of railroads in the United States, more than all of Europe, including Russia. Who do you have to thank for this? We have Collins Huntington and James Gould of Union Pacific. See, look at the name. Going to build a railroad all the way across the Union, all the way to the Pacific. A lot of money. Now, coming out of the railroad development, we have time zones. This is where it starts. That wasn't for TV. Nope, it's to coordinate shipping. Eastern time, Central, Mountain, and Pacific. Everyone's heard that phrase before. Now you know what it means. Now, what's a standardized track gauge? A track gauge, gentle listeners, is how wide it is between the rails. 4 feet 8.5 inches is our standard gauge in the United States since 1886. If you have different track gauges, what's going to happen? Your train goes off the rails, hence the expression off the rails. Train wrecks are bad. Nobody likes train wrecks, and your stuff doesn't get there on time. In fact, the entire planet uses 4 feet 8.5 inches as a track gauge, except for one country. What country is that? Think about it. You said Russia. Bingo, you got it. Of course, there's no prize for this, but hey, just in the, knowing you have extra knowledge, there's your prize. Isn't that what we all want? Yeah, somebody shouts, I'd rather take the money. Well, all this money floating around, you can't really trace it all, right? Sometimes this stuff goes to places it's not supposed to go. So corruption is a bit of a problem in 19th century railroads. And sooner or later, the United States government, though it's not the brightest organization on the planet, does want to know what happened to its money. And they start asking you questions you don't have answers to. What are these questions? All boils down to this. I want my money. Where's my money? Because if they can't find the money, you're going to prison. And it's the late 19th century. Or you end up working on that railroad for free. And believe me, it's bad enough working when they pay you for it. The lesson here is don't steal. Now, not everyone is sure what the rules are once these railroads are built. That's why the Interstate Commerce Act, establishing the Interstate Commerce Commission, comes in. Oversees the railroad practices. The first thing they stop is monopolistic practices like pooling. What's pooling? Well, if I need something shipped to Cleveland, it has to go at a particular time. You can't hold it back because you don't like me. Okay? For some reason, you don't like me, which I can't figure out why because I'm delightful. Just ask me. You hold it back so you could try and jack the price up so the guy gets desperate. You can't do that. Or you got rebates where Mr. H's shipping company will charge so much for you, but try to overcharge for somebody else and then give you a rebate at the end so you get your money back. You can't do that. And of course, discriminatory short distance rates. Not allowed to do that. If you're in Pittsburgh shipping to Cleveland, it's 112 miles, and you say I can't make enough money, so no, I'm not going to ship it, or you jack the price up so high to make it ridiculous that they don't do it, you can't do that either. So that's where the Interstate Commerce Commission exists today. Of course, now it's been updated. They're dealing with eBay and things like that now, but they still handle the railroads too. It hasn't changed. Now, we got some people who make a lot of money off of the Industrial Revolution. And here's one guy already, Andrew Carnegie. He's from Scotland, but he spent most of his time here in the U.S. in Pittsburgh. So he's a Pittsburgh guy. We claim him. He started off as a telegraph operator in the Pennsylvania railroads and found ways to cut costs and double mileage. So, if any company you're in, I don't care what it is you're doing, you want to get in good with the management, find ways to cut costs. They always love it when you cut costs. Unfortunately, it's usually labor costs. They took what he learned in the Pennsylvania railroads and went off into the steel industry, got cut off there, industry down there. So off we go to the steel industry. Andrew Carnegie, he built his own steel mills and utilizes the Bessemer technique. The Bessemer technique is this. You blast air through molten iron to burn off impurities and carbon. Instead of a guy standing on a catwalk, you, with a rake pulling all the stuff off, you're just blasting air through and blasting that stuff away. See, big cost cutter, big into wages. It's great because it lowers prices, but unfortunately, people work very hard for very little, going to start to get angry after a while, and labor disputes in the late 19th century are pretty nasty. Now, vertical integration. Put your hand on the table and go straight up with it. Right, that's vertical. Controlling every part of the production process, from mining to selling and shipping. Now, Mr. H has his railroad company, right? I got to buy steel. I got to buy railroad ties, right? Got to go out and get shipping, get this stuff to me. Well, what if I own the mine? Buy the mine, so now it's mine. Yeah, I didn't mean to rhyme with that, but it's how it turns out. So, I've got the mine. I got the shipping. I'm shipping the goods, say, sewing machines, and I start my own sewing machine company on the other end. I control the entire process, which means I can control the price, which is going to be very high, right? Because when you get mass production in the assembly line, you control the whole thing. You charge whatever you want. And bingo, Carnegie Steel, which has its fingers in mining and selling and everything else, becomes the first U.S. company worth $1 billion. Now, somebody tried to tell me that $1 billion is a lot more now than it was then. I say, I'll still take $1 billion anywhere you want, Now, usually these guys, when they start getting old, they start getting a little worried because they're closing in on the finish line. They end up trying to give back to the community. They call it philanthropy, or it's just an old guy trying to buy his way into heaven. Up in Pittsburgh, we got the Carnegie Museum of Natural History right here. So he's trying to give back to the community here by building a museum for everybody. Used to be a newspaper machine right there. When I was a kid, I put a quarter in there and I took like 10 newspapers, ran over here and sold them for a quarter each. Right? It's my first job outside my dad's pizza place. This is a skeleton of a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I know this because I know what a Tyrannosaurus looks like, plus see, 2 claws. Now, when I was a kid, they built this thing as an Allosaurus. I informed the security guard that it's got 2 claws. It's a Tyrannosaurus. The skeleton's still there, and it says Tyrannosaurus now. So you have Mr. H to thank, and you are welcome. All righty, we got John D. Rockefeller, another one of these industrialists. We'll take a little break and pick up with him, digest what you have learned so far, and we'll be back in just a bit. Das Vidania.